He thought it was just a sinkhole, a patch of sunken dirt in the back acre of his cornfield, easy to ignore, easy to blame on the rain. But when he dug deeper, he uncovered a rusted door set into the earth, and behind it, a tunnel that hadn't seen light in decades. What waited inside wasn't just forgotten, it was buried for a reason. Before we get started, let us know in the comments where in the world are you watching from, and if stories like this grab you by the heart, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode is even more unbelievable than this one. The first time Ellis Ward noticed the dip in the cornfield, he blamed the rain. It had been a wet spring, the kind that turned soil to soup and made tractors weep oil. He'd seen soft spots in the earth before. But this one was different. It didn't feel soggy. It felt sunken. He was out before sunrise, same as always, coffee in one hand and a pair of work gloves in the other. The corn was shoulder high. Already, weeks ahead of schedule, and he'd planned to walk the west rows to check for signs of blight. Instead, his boots carried him to the farthest edge of his property, where the earth seemed to sag like a sigh. He crouched and ran a gloved hand across the cracked dirt. No tracks, no obvious cave-in, just a hollow sound beneath the crust when he tapped with his knuckles. He frowned, stood, and stomped once. Thud, not the thump of wet ground, not the crunch of gravel or clay. Something harder. Metal, maybe, or concrete. Something man-made where there shouldn't be anything but topsoil and roots. Ellis wasn't a man to jump to conclusions. 57 years old, third-generation farmer, proud owner of land that had belonged to his grandfather and his grandfather's father before that. He trusted soil. Trusted it to grow things, to bury things, to remember. But this felt like something the land was trying to forget. He fetched a shovel from the barn, grumbling under his breath about lost time and better things to do. But he dug anyway. Slow at first, then faster, when the clang of metal echoed back from the dirt. Within the hour, the tip of a rusted handle emerged. It was thick, bolted, and round the kind of industrial lever you'd see on a fallout shelter or a bank vault. A rectangle of solid steel sat beneath it, framed with rivets, sealed into the ground like a wound stitched shut. He stepped back, breath shallow. What the hell is this? He scraped more dirt away, revealing a door square, sunken, and old. The kind of thing meant to stay hidden. The sun was high now, lighting the corn in golden streaks. But the door looked cold, untouched by the warmth, like it remembered something darker. He leaned down and tugged on the handle. It didn't budge. Rust bit back. He fetched oil from the shed, soaked the joints, and waited. Then he tried again, this time with both hands and a grunt that echoed through the field like a shot. With a shriek of metal and a gust of stale air, the door opened. Darkness stared back. Not the kind of darkness that comes from nightfall, but the kind that lives underground thick, still, full of waiting. A tunnel stretched beneath the field, arched in brick and dirt. Cobwebs clung to the edges. The air smelled of iron and time. Ellis stood at the threshold, his breath catching. He didn't know what he'd found. Not yet. But something deep inside him whispered that his life, and maybe the history of this land, had just split in two. Before the door, and after. And now, the only way forward was down. Ellis stared into the hole for a long time. The daylight didn't reach far. Just a narrow shaft of gold cutting into the dark, bouncing off stone walls slick with age. He grabbed his old flashlight from the workshop, the one he kept under the sink for tornado warnings, and stepped down slowly. The steps were carved into packed earth, reinforced with timber beams. Someone had built this, intentionally not just dug it but engineered it. He counted each step as he descended, one hand brushing the wall for balance. 10, 11, 12. The air grew cooler, damper. By the time he reached the bottom, he could see the tunnel stretched nearly 20 feet ahead before curving into shadow. His flashlight flickered old batteries, he guessed, but the beam caught something strange on the wall. Carvings. Dozens of them. Symbols etched deep into the stone, some familiar, others not. A horseshoe. An eye. a series of numbers scratched in uneven lines. Ellis reached out and ran a finger over them. They were old, worn, but intentional. Maybe code, maybe warnings. He moved slowly, flashlight steady. Every sound echoed: his footsteps, the creak of old timber, the rasp of his own breathing. He half expected the walls to close in behind him, like something out of a movie. But they didn't. He rounded the bend. That's when he saw the door. A second one, deeper, underground, smaller than the first, but better preserved. This one had no rust, no decay. It was clean, sealed. A single brass keyhole gleamed beneath a tarnished nameplate. ISAAC Ford. 1948. Ellis blinked. That name, it was familiar. His father had mentioned it once or twice. A recluse who'd owned a parcel of this land generations ago. Sold it off before disappearing. No one knew where he went. No one asked. Ellis reached for the door. It didn't open. He tried to force it, but it was locked tight. He stared at the name again. Isaac Ford. The year, 1948. 75 years ago. He backed away, heart pounding. This wasn't just a tunnel. It was a vault. A sealed memory, buried in the bones of the land. And whatever it was meant to protect or contain had been waiting for someone to find it. Someone like him. He turned off the flashlight. Stood still in the dark. He didn't know why, but the silence felt necessary. Like the tunnel was listening. Like it had just taken its first breath in decades. And Ellis knew, somehow, that everything in his life, the farm, the quiet days, the seasons that passed unnoticed, had all led to this door. And the key he didn't yet know he was holding. Back above ground, Ellis barely slept. The tunnel haunted his thoughts, like a whisper he couldn't quite catch. Over dinner, he stared out the window toward the cornfield. His wife, Nora, noticed. "You're quiet tonight," she said gently. He nodded but didn't answer. What could he tell her? That beneath their soil was a door with a stranger's name? That the ground they'd planted for decades had secrets breathing beneath it? The next morning, he returned with a crowbar, a headlamp, and a thermos of coffee. He told Nora he was clearing an old drainage pipe. It wasn't a lie. Just not the truth either. Down in the tunnel, the air felt heavier. The walls sweated faintly, like the stone itself remembered being alive. He paused before the second door. Isaac Ford, 1948. It glinted faintly in his headlamp's glow. Ellis examined the brass keyhole. It was narrow and smooth, not corroded, not jammed. Whatever was inside had been sealed well, not with decay in mind, but preservation. He searched the walls nearby. On the left side of the door, half covered by dirt and root, he spotted a dented metal box like an old utility cabinet bolted into the stone. It took force, but the latch gave way. Inside, wrapped in wax paper and string, was a small bundle, a key. Ellis's heart jumped. He turned it in his fingers. It was brass, worn, warm to the touch despite the chill. He didn't hesitate. The lock clicked. The door opened with a groan, not the scream of rust, but the tired breath of something old finally allowed to exhale. A room stretched beyond. No bigger than a root cellar. But every inch was organized, deliberate. Shelves lined the walls, filled with journals, tins, labeled boxes, and glass bottles filled with something. At the far end, a single oil lantern sat atop a wooden workbench, along with a stack of weathered notebooks. Ellis stepped inside, careful not to disturb anything. Dust coated everything in a soft layer, like frost. The smell was strange aged leather, oil, and something faintly metallic. He picked up the top notebook. The cover was embossed with initials. I. F. Inside, the handwriting was tight, neat. The first entry dated the 12th of April 1948. It began plainly. If you've found this, then you've already opened the first door. That means the land is speaking again. And if it's speaking, that means it's remembering. I didn't bury this for treasure. I buried it for protection from others, and from myself. Ellis read the words 3 times. The tunnel hadn't been for escape. It was built for containment. Not to hide something from the world, but to keep the world safe from whatever was hidden. And Ellis had just let it breathe again. The more Ellis explored the chamber, the more it felt like stepping into someone's mind. Every object had purpose. Every item, a memory. A coil of copper wire neatly bundled, blueprints rolled and labeled by year. Even a broken pocket watch pinned to the wall beside a faded photo of a young boy. But it was the journals that pulled him in. He sat on the bench and flipped through the pages, light from the lantern dancing across Isaac Ford's steady handwriting. The entries weren't just records, they were confessions, observations, warnings. There's a hum beneath the corn, a frequency. I first heard it in 45, right after the harvest. Thought I was going mad. Then the animals began acting strange, cattle walking in circles, dogs whining at the walls. Even my wife felt it, though she never said it aloud. Ellis looked up, suddenly aware of the silence. Even underground, he could feel the weight of those words. Further into the journals, the tone darkened. Isaac's entries shifted from curious to frantic. Something's under the West Acre. I can feel it. Like it's waiting. I dug deeper last week. It wasn't just earth. I found something metal, not mine. Buried too precisely. No maker's mark. Just smooth. Like a lid. Ellis felt the back of his neck prickle. The West Acre. That's exactly where he'd found the sinkhole. The room wasn't just a shelter. It was a study. A shrine. And possibly a prison. Not for Isaac. For something else. He continued reading. I've sealed the lower hatch. If anyone finds this, they must understand. Do not open it. Curiosity is a predator. It feeds until there's nothing left. I made that mistake once. I won't again. Beneath that line was a diagram, a hand-drawn map of the tunnel system. It showed the door he'd just opened, the chamber he now sat in, and then a second path. A lower tunnel, marked only with one word. Below. Ellis leaned back, notebook trembling in his hands. He hadn't seen another tunnel. Not yet, but if it was there, and if it still existed, then this chamber, all of it, was just the beginning. He closed the journal slowly, placed it back where he found it, and turned to the far wall. That's when he saw it, a narrow slit in the stone behind a stack of old crates, a tunnel, lower, hidden. Isaac had buried the truth, but Ellis was the one who'd just begun unearthing it. Ellis returned the next morning, sleep-deprived, and carrying a thermos of coffee so strong it bit the tongue. He hadn't told Nora anything. Not yet. Some truths needed to ripen before they were picked, and this one was still green. But inside, something had shifted. He no longer saw his land the same way. The cornfield had become a veil, and underneath it, the bones of another life waited to be understood. Down in the chamber, the air was still cool, still unmoved by time. He brushed off more dust, carefully stacking the journals Isaac Ford had left behind. Each was marked with a rodnai. Year: 1946, 1947, 1948. The earliest one was thinner, the entries scattered. It was clear Isaac hadn't started with obsession, just curiosity. Found strange metal beneath the West Acre while trenching for a new well. Smooth, cold, too perfect to be natural. It hummed when I struck it with a pick. Didn't think much of it. Should have stopped there. The pages turned darker as the months progressed. Heard it again last night, that humming. This time, it was inside the house. Floorboards rattled. Lights flickered. Annabelle woke crying, said the walls were whispering. I told her it was wind, but we both knew better. Ellis stopped reading. Annabelle, Isaac's daughter. There had been rumors decades ago about a girl who went missing. No one ever connected it to the Ford farm. People said she'd run away. The dreams have started. The lid, whatever it is, calls out. Not in words. In feeling. It wants to be opened. I've boarded it over. I've written to the state. Asked for help. No one responds. It's like the land's been forgotten on purpose. The state. Ellis sat up. Could the government have known? Did they help Isaac cover it up? Or worse, did they help him bury it? The journal entries in the final volume were frantic. smudged ink, rushed handwriting. I found Annabelle kneeling over the hatch again. Her eyes weren't hers. She was humming that same note, said it was beautiful. I pulled her away. She screamed like something had been ripped out of her. Ellis's hands trembled. I've sealed the tunnel. Reinforced it with stone and iron. If this record survives, let it serve as a warning. This is not a place of answers. It is a wound that cannot heal. Bury it. Forget it. Please, don't listen to it. The final entry was dated the 14th of September 1948, just days before the land record showed Isaac Ford sold the property and vanished from public record. But clearly, he hadn't gone far. Not if these journals remained untouched. And Ellis hadn't just found his words. He'd found the thing he begged to keep buried. Behind the crates, the narrow tunnel led down. Steeper than the last. No timbers. No reinforcement. Just raw stone. It smelled different. Less like earth. More like metal left in the sun. Ellis felt it before he saw it, the vibration. Faint. Low. Like a heartbeat in the stone. He clicked on his flashlight and started down, step by uncertain step. At the bottom, a chamber opened larger than the one above. And in the center, half buried under dirt and rock, was the lid. It was smooth, seamless, circular, about 6 feet across, no hinges, no bolts. Just a perfect disc of polished black metal that caught his flashlight's beam and threw it back like a mirror. Ellis reached out, hesitating just above it. It was cold and humming. He pulled his hand back fast, like the lid had bit him. It hadn't, but something about touching it felt wrong. Like interrupting a thought that wasn't yours. The hum wasn't loud, but it was deep. Subsonic, maybe. More felt than heard. Like standing too close to a power transformer. Ellis circled the disc. There were no markings, no buttons, no seams. Just that same polished black surface, flawless and ancient. The journal hadn't lied, it didn't belong here. Hell, it didn't belong anywhere he knew. Beside it, the earth had caved slightly. Loose soil sloped into a corner, revealing something metallic, poking out a box, maybe. Ellis dropped to one knee and brushed dirt away. It was a lockbox, the kind you'd find in a wartime bunker, heavy, lined with rivets. He pulled it free and wiped off the dust, stamped on the lid. Property of I.F. Inside were 3 items. A folded letter, an envelope marked confidential, U.S. Gov., and a photograph. Ellis unfolded the photo first. It showed a younger Isaac Ford, mid-30s, clean-shaven, standing beside a group of men in army uniforms. Behind them, a large excavation site, not in Georgia. Desert terrain, tents, machinery. The edges of a massive disc-shaped object just barely visible behind them. The letter, written in Isaac's same tight cursive, was dated June 1945. I was part of a team assigned to investigate foreign technologies recovered overseas. One object, unlike anything we'd seen, was transported stateside. I was tasked with research under Project Grove. They moved the artifact east, but something happened during transit. We lost control. It vanished from official logs. I smuggled part of it back here. The disc, the source. Ellis stared at the words, heart thudding. He wasn't just dealing with history. He was standing on a classified burial ground. The second envelope, government stamped, contained typewritten memos, partially redacted. Mentions of magnetic anomalies. Containment protocols. Mental deterioration. Unapproved relocation by civilian contractor. 1. Ford. Ellis sat back. Against the stone wall. Breath shallow. Isaac had stolen the disc, buried it here, built his life above it, and lost everything in the process. He opened the final note. Handwritten, addressed to the next man to find this. If you found this box, then I failed. Curiosity always wins. I tried to outthink it, contain it, reason with it. You cannot. It will reach into your life, your mind, your home. You must bury it again, but not alone. Tell no one, or tell everyone. Either way, you must decide. Ellis closed the box slowly. Above him, the cornfield swayed in the breeze, unaware of the hum just beneath its roots. He looked once more at the disk, its reflection shining back like a second sun in the dark. And for the first time since discovering the tunnel, Ellis asked himself a question far more terrifying than, "What is it?" He whispered aloud. "What do I do with it?" 3 days passed before Ellis told anyone. He tried to keep it to himself, tried to wake up, walk the rows, and live like nothing had changed. But once you've found a buried secret vibrating beneath your land, the surface never feels the same. He went to town for feed, kept his eyes low. But something must have changed in his face, because old Mr. Harlan at the hardware store raised a brow and asked, "You all right, Ellis? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ellis forced a chuckle. "Just tired," he muttered. But the truth clung to him like dust, and secrets, like roots, always find a way to break through. On the 4th day, a black SUV pulled up his gravel drive. The man who stepped out was tall, clean-cut, not local. Pressed slacks, windbreaker with a government seal on the shoulder. The kind of visitor that made the cows go quiet, and the dogs unsure whether to bark or run. "Mr. Ward?" the man asked. Ellis nodded slowly. "My name's Dean Whitmore. I'm with the Department of Preservation. Mind if we speak inside?" They sat at the kitchen table. Nora had gone into town for the afternoon. The air inside felt still like it knew it was being listened to. Dean didn't touch his coffee, just pulled out a folder. "You're sitting on a unique piece of property, Mr. Ward. Did you know that part of your land was once owned by a man named Isaac Ford?" Ellis didn't answer. Dean continued. "Ford was contracted by the federal government during the war. Worked on top-secret engineering projects. Some unconventional. He vanished in 1948, and we lost track of him. Until now." He slid a photograph across the table. It was the same one Ellis had found in the lockbox. Isaac Ford, with soldiers, excavation equipment behind him. Ellis's throat tightened. "We believe Ford smuggled unauthorized materials out of a restricted research site and buried them here. Materials that don't belong to him, or you." Ellis leaned forward, voice calm. "If this is about land rights, I own this property fair and legal." Dean smiled without warmth. "We're not disputing ownership, Mr. Ward. We're offering protection. These artifacts, they have consequences, exposure risk, mental and environmental. We'd prefer to keep this quiet, for your safety, for everyone's." He handed Ellis a card. "Think it over. We'll return." When the SUV disappeared back down the dirt road, Ellis stood alone on the porch, card trembling in his hand. The government knew. And if they were watching him now, it meant they'd been watching long before. He walked back toward the cornfield, toward the door beneath the soil. The hum was still there, like it had never stopped. Like it never would. And now, Ellis realized, the real danger wasn't just what lay underground. It was how many people already knew it was there. That night, Ellis stood in the barn, staring at the tools hanging on the wall, each one familiar, each one a part of a life that suddenly felt foreign. He thought about Isaac's warnings. About the journals, the metal disc, the man in the black SUV. The government wanted it back, but they didn't just want to study it. They wanted to erase it. And for the first time, Ellis understood why Isaac had buried it rather than surrender it. This wasn't just about secrecy. It was about guilt. The next morning, whispers started in town. Someone had seen the SUV parked at his property. Someone else claimed to see Ellis coming out of a hole in the cornfield. In a small town like Granger, stories moved faster than facts. Some folks thought Ellis had found treasure. Others swore it was a storm shelter. A few whispered the word alien, half laughing, half not. He tried to stay quiet. Tried to keep working the land like normal. But the tunnel called to him. Every night, he returned rereading Isaac's final notes, checking the sealed room, circling the lid. The hum grew louder. He hadn't imagined it. Even when the tunnel was still, it was alive. Something below that metal disc was watching, waiting. Not a creature. Not a monster. But intention. It didn't want to be buried anymore. Ellis sat on the bench, thinking about Annabelle, the girl who had disappeared. Her name wasn't in the county records. No school enrollment. No obituary. She'd been scrubbed. The government hadn't just buried the object. They'd buried everyone it touched. That night, he wrote a letter, addressed it to Nora, not because he thought he was in danger, but because he needed someone to understand what he'd seen, what he'd felt. He tucked it inside an old cigar box with a flashlight and a map of the tunnel system, sealed it, and buried it under the floorboards of the barn, just in case. He wasn't sure what he would do next. Tell the town? Give it over to the feds? Seal it back up, and pretend none of it happened? But as he walked through the corn again, rose tall, golden in the late summer light, he looked back at the slight patch of sunken earth where it had all begun, and, for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. He felt responsible, because some things aren't meant to be found. But once they are, you don't just walk away. Ellis didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table, the cigar box resting in front of him. The letter to Nora inside felt heavier than it should have. Not in weight, in meaning. Words he couldn't say out loud lived in that envelope. Truths too strange to speak plainly. He drank his coffee black, the way his father always had. Thought about the stories passed down over meals, in barns, beside broken tractors. The old tales of the land. About wells that ran dry too fast. Strange lights in the fields. Whispers when the wind stopped blowing. He always dismissed them as superstition. Small, town folklore. Not anymore. At first light, he drove to the county records office, asked for everything they had on the Ford family. Most of the clerks barely recognized the name. One found a thin file, dust on the edges, property deed, sale documents, a handwritten signature, Isaac Ford. But no birth certificate for Annabelle, no school records, no photo, nothing to confirm she'd ever existed. He left with the file under his arm, and a knot tightening in his gut. On the way home, he took a detour down to the Historical Society. Miss Lester, who ran the archive, had known his grandfather. Ellis Ward, she smiled, brushing white curls from her face. Now there's a name that smells like corn and motor oil. Miss Lester, he said, tipping his hat. You ever hear of Isaac Ford? Her smile faltered, just a hair. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. She leaned in, voice lower. Used to be rumors about him, his daughter. People said he was a war hero, but quiet. Reclusive. When his daughter went missing, some thought she'd run. Others whispered, well, you know how people talk. No one ever found her? She shook her head. They say grief can make a man dig his own grave early. He sold the land cheap. Vanished. Ellis thanked her and left, heart heavy. Back on the farm, the sun hovered low, casting golden shadows across the field. He returned to the tunnel, flashlight in hand, descended once more into the dark. He passed the sealed chamber, stepped carefully around the metal disc, still thrumming. He didn't touch it this time. Instead, he pulled out Isaac's last notebook, the smallest one, pages warped from time and sweat. The final entry was short. If someone finds this, they deserve the truth. I brought something here that was never mine to keep. I tried to study it, tried to control it. I lost my daughter instead. She didn't die. She changed. It showed her things. She couldn't come back from them. I couldn't either. But maybe someone else can put it to rest. The lines blurred as Ellis read them. She didn't die. She changed. And now that same choice sat in front of him. He could hand it over. Let the Bollensposen it o. Government take it. Let them study it again. Risk the cycle repeating. Or he could do what Isaac never could. Bury it. Not just with dirt, but with intention, with understanding, with finality. Because some legacies aren't meant to be passed on. They're meant to be ended. The next morning, Ellis parked the old flatbed near the field and loaded it with stone, lumber, and cement bags he'd kept stored behind the barn for years, left over from a porch project that never got finished. He didn't ask for help. Didn't call the county. Didn't warn the government. This wasn't their land. Not really. Not in the way it was his. It had grown his corn, raised his cattle, built his family. And now, It asked for one more thing. He returned to the tunnel, piece by piece, and began sealing it. He bricked over the entrance from inside first. Built a false wall with mortar so thick it would outlast him by decades. Poured cement over the lower shaft, covering the disc completely. Layer by layer, dirt, rock, iron. As he worked, sweat soaking his shirt, he thought of Isaac, a man who tried to bury a secret and failed. Ellis wouldn't. He finished the seal in silence. Stood over it, the final patch of dirt packed down. No markers, no sign. Just a smooth floor, like the earth had never been disturbed. Back on the surface, he filled in the hole where the hatch had first appeared. Piled fresh soil, scattered corn husks over it. By the time the sun began to set, there was no trace left. Just one more row in the field. That night, he sat beside Nora on the porch. She didn't ask why his hands were blistered. She just handed him a cold drink and leaned against his shoulder. "You okay?" she asked. He paused, then nodded. "I think I am now." She didn't push, didn't need to. Some truths live best in silence. Weeks passed, then months. The field grew tall and full again. The whispers around town faded, replaced by harvest talk and fair preparations. The man from Washington never came back. Ellis burned the journals. All of them. One page at a time, feeding them to the wood stove like dry leaves, except for one. The final note from Isaac, the letter addressed, "To the next man to find this." He kept that one folded in his pocket, worn soft with handling. On the first frost morning of October, Ellis walked to the edge of the field, where the grass grew thicker, wild. He knelt, dug a small hole, placed the letter inside an old tobacco tin. Buried it shallow, not for someone to find, but as a way to say goodbye. Some secrets live long beneath the soil, longer than memory, longer than names, but this one would stay buried. Because Ellis Ward understood now. The truest kind of legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you choose never to let rise again.